Hi guys, on this edition of the Rev Cooks, an absolute dream. A family favorite, fresh Pico de Gallo. So good that every time I make it, it's gone in hours. All right, so we're gonna make this Pico de Gallo. A couple things about the recipe. The recipe is written for really one, but I always double it because it's just, one's never enough. There's always, it kind of seems to disappear immediately because everyone really loves it so much. So the next thing is that in the recipe, it calls for just like a small tomatoes. I prefer the Roma tomatoes. So, you want to get them nice sized as you can. Make sure they're kind of ripe because for the pico, you want it to have that rich flavor of the tomatoes. So we got to start by chopping up, which is really the most tedious and annoying part of this. A couple tricks along the way I'll show you as we do this. So let's get after it. All right, so make sure you wash your vegetables, all the vegetables really well, just because they come from the grocery store and not the greatest of shape necessarily. So, and make sure you have the right tools. I like to use the tomato knife here to cut the tomatoes, obviously. So this guy, as you can see, has a little bit of a sort of a gross thing on there. So I'm gonna start by cutting that guy off and kind of get that out of the way. And then I'll take and cut the top off. And then I like to take sort of as much of these little pieces here as I can, because the pico always seems to go quickly, so as much of it I can make as possible is definitely preferred. So I'll show you how I cut up one of these guys, and then we'll just sort of speed through the rest, or maybe I'll do a couple of them. So I cut down like this first, sort of make myself some vertical slices here. And then sort of like take these guys and lay them down. It's gonna have a lot of seeds, as you can see here, and sometimes I keep some of them, sometimes I don't. I typically kind of get rid of most of the seeds because they're kind of gross. They don't really add any good flavor to the pico, but nonetheless, then I'm gonna take these guys here, cut them up like so into these sort of slices, if you will. And then we wanna just dice these guys. So nice, medium-sized chunks, because after all, this is a well, not really finger food, but this is a food you're going to put it on top of, chips or something. So, or really, we like to use this for a lot of different things. Put it on top of eggs or whatever else you want to do. So, but nonetheless, so we're going to go ahead and cut these guys, all these Romas this way. Like I said, I feel like cutting the tomatoes is kind of the most annoying part. Well, cutting the cilantro is probably equally, maybe more so annoying. But the thing about the tomatoes is there's just so many of them. We're gonna use 8 of these guys because, again, I'm doubling the recipe. That it just becomes kind of an annoyance of time to kind of do this. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these guys up, and then we'll get back when we go to the next step. All right, so once you got those all chopped up like that, we're gonna go ahead and move those guys to our bowl. I always like to use a glass bowl if possible, obviously to avoid the microplastics if we can. But also, I don't particularly like metal bowls for this because it does have the citrus in it, which is not really totally great. It's probably not a big deal, but I just prefer to use a glass bowl. At this point, I like to go ahead and add the lime and the salt to kind of get the flavor sort of moving a little bit in there. So I'm gonna take my salt here. It is, again, doubling the recipe, 1 teaspoon. Really whatever salt you prefer. This is sea salt, but you could use really Himalayan salt or iodized salt, whatever you prefer. So kind of just sprinkle that 1 teaspoon over the top of that. And then we're gonna take our limes. So the thing about the limes is that you wanna make sure they're very juicy. So if they're not, you wanna have maybe a 3rd lime or extra lime sort of standing by, because you really gotta get a lot of moisture and juice out of them. And when you buy these limes from the store, sometimes they're not like super juicy. So I like to kind of put a little pressure, roll them around first to kind of soften them up. to see if we can kind of really get a lot of that out of there. And then we're going to go ahead and chop our limes. I'll use a real knife for this. I'm using a lemon juicer, but lemon juicer, lime juicer, who really cares, right? So go ahead and, oh, that's a good amount there. So I don't know if you could see that, but I'll do another one. So take a look here. That's a good amount of lime juice there. So our first lime has got a good amount there. And again, we have, since we're doubling the recipe, we're gonna use 2 limes here. So second lime. Yeah, good. So these ones are pretty juicy, but depending on the time of year and where you buy the limes, sometimes they can be kind of on the dry side. So if that's the case, just add a 3rd lime because you want a good solid amount of liquid in order to really get the flavors moving. So at this point, I'm going to take and kind of mix this stuff up a little bit. I know it's really just the tomatoes and the liquids, or tomatoes and the lime and the salt at the moment, but we want the flavors to start really working together. And the tomatoes really are the part of this that kind of need the salt. So we're going to get that going. We're going to set it aside, and we're going to move on to cutting our onion. Okay, so onto the onion. So I like to use a yellow onion in particular. I pretty much use yellow onions for really any time I'm using onions. I find their flavors a little not as strong, it's a little more mild, and just they tend to be really, I don't know, kind of delicious. So, and we get them, a bag at a time. So that's kind of the other reason. So we need this whole onion diced up pretty good. So the way I like to dice the onion, whether or not this is correct, I don't really care because, hey, this is my video. I'm doing what I want. So anyhow, take the top and bottom off. Cut it in half, and then peel off the first couple of layers. This is not really news to anybody, but this is just what I do. So I'm going to get off these first couple of layers here till it doesn't look as gross. Okay, so get off all these little membranes and whatnot, and the other side as well. And sometimes, if you can see, you can kind of tell the texture. If it's a little on the rubbery side for the exterior, then obviously you don't want to use those ones. You keep taking them off until it's got sort of like exactly the texture of that you want. So I might end up taking that next layer off of that one. So the way I cut these guys up, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, but what I do is I'm going to take and cut maybe from about 8/9 or so of the way up, and then straight down, kind of into as big of a pieces as I want, and then go all the way down the onion this way. Okay, some people like to do a little slice this way. I don't really feel the need to, since it's got this sort of a concentric circle deal here. When you just cut it straight away this way, you're actually going to get pretty good little dicing. So I'm going to cut this guy into a sort of a smallish dice here. So I'm going to get it down till I'm cutting to that part that right where I was before, and then just chop the rest of the guy into a, however you want. If you want to add a couple more chops, you can, whatever. But the fact is that that's the way I dice my onions, and I'll do the same thing to this guy. So again, about 8/9 of the way up. And it's not perfect, but hey, you know what? It's not a restaurant. It's our house, so we do it how we want. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be delicious. And, I know that this is, not truly cooking. This is just combining ingredients, but, I wanted to just sort of do the pico because it really is a crowd favorite. And it's super simple to make. Again, chopping this last little part up here. Okay. Then we're going to take that onion through some tears, and we're going to go ahead and add that to the bowl here. Just like so. Give it a nice little stir to combine the flavors. And again, this is going to just kind of sit here while we do the other 2 ingredients. So, yeah, so let me just go ahead and wipe my tears away because that onion was pretty strong. And then we'll be back for the jalapenos because there are a couple tricks to that. All right, so a couple things about the jalapenos because that's the next thing I'm going to cut up, because I always leave the cilantro for the last because it is actually by far the most annoying part of the process because the chopping just takes a while. It kind of gets everywhere, but that's fine. So the jalapenos that we get are just whatever we can get at the store. This is actually a pretty big one. We're gonna take 2. You can really vary the amount of jalapenos you put in depending on how spicy you want it to be. It feels like to me, I typically can just put as many jalapenos as I want in there. It doesn't seem to like really overly affect the spiciness of the pico, but it does add a nice flavor to it. So working with jalapenos can be a little dangerous. I learned the hard way that the first thing you want to do when working with jalapenos is put on rubber gloves, because I made the mistake one time of not putting the rubber gloves on and then getting done making the pico and then going off to an event I had to go to. And while I had washed my hands after and everything, I did soap and water and all that. And I'm at the event and my eye itched and I did a little scratch and I regretted it for the rest of the night. So rubber gloves whenever working with the jalapenos, and I'll probably just keep these gloves on when I get to the cilantro as well, because as I said, it's kind of messy, so it's sort of best to just kind of keep the gloves on at that point. So the first thing about the jalapenos is you got to, of course, get the seeds and that interior part out. So let's go ahead and have this guy. Okay, so you see a good amount of seeds in there. So what I'm going to do is get these seeds and ribs out of here. The seeds, you can leave them if you want. I don't do that. I do know that a lot of the heat from the jalapeno comes from the seeds. I'm not like the hugest fan of like tinkering with the seeds because they're kind of a pain, but you want to get all the like ribs and stuff out of there. So we'll do that. Oh, left a seed over here, get that off. And then, this side as well, get the primary parts of the seeds out of there. Maybe take that rib out of there. So make sure you get all the seeds. If you miss one, it's not like at the end of the world, you'll probably find it later, okay? So we're gonna do that for both of our jalapenos. So let me just go ahead and get the other guy here. So again, cut the top off and cut it lengthwise. Open that bad boy up. Yeah, look at that. Ooh, get all them seeds out of there because no one likes the seeds. So just gonna get those guys out. A little tapping kind of sometimes helps, but whatever. It's not a complicated thing. You're literally just removing seeds and ribs from jalapenos. So take care of that. And this guy, and we'll get ready to chop these guys in a second. Okay, so as you can see, I got them all cleaned up now. So the way that I chop these guys up is a little painstaking. So you want to kind of flip them to this side depending on how sharp your knife is. Our knife has not been sharpened in a while, so it's kind of dull-ish. So you want to slice it really very thin. See how thin and small that is there? Right? So I'm going to do that all the way up. And I use the back side of the jalapeno like this because if your knife is not like super, super sharp, it's easier to slice it once you break through that the little exterior part there. So I make these nice small cuts here, just little slivers all the way down. And notice I kind of go about this a little bit slower because since it's such a thin little slice, I want to make sure I'm careful not to slice off a thin little slice to my own finger, which would be far worse than, kind of speeding it along would maybe cause more of that issue to happen, of a accidental finger slice to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and slice this guy here. So this is still a little bit on the thick side, so I'm just going to slice that portion there, and then kind of carefully slice a piece there. Okay, so Then we want this a nice fine dice. So I'm gonna go ahead and line these little bad boys up like soldiers off the battle there. And then just start slicing real small pieces up like this. And you know, if you don't do it perfect the first time, it's all good. I mean, I'm not a perfect vegetable slicer either. So I'll go through it the first time and then I'll maybe run through, and some of these guys are not cooperating real well, but that's fine. That's how it goes. So give it a nice small chop there. And you want this to be, you know, kind of small like this. Some of these pieces are a little bit bigger than others. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and kind of give it a nice little chop again. So just come through there, nice little chop. You want it to be a pretty fine dice like that, okay? So, and if you see that you missed a little piece because it's a little longer than others, like that guy, just go ahead and chop it up. All right. So I'm going to do these other 3 halves, and then we'll pop back in when we're ready to deal with it. All right, so I got my jalapenos all diced up. So we'll go ahead and add them on in. Seems like a lot of jalapenos, but you know, it's a tried and tested recipe, so it seems to work and everyone seems to like it, so that's good enough for me. Give that a little mix. Again, I kind of just mix these things as I go a little bit because I want the flavors to really start getting together, because depending on how long you have before you need to actually eat this, you know, if you don't have like several hours to a day or so, then you really want to get the flavors moving quickly. So get that guy mixed in there pretty nicely. And on to the cilantro. So this is a pretty big bunch of cilantro. They do vary in size usually. Make sure you give it a nice thorough wash. First thing I do is, because again, we're making a double recipe here, I'm gonna use the whole bunch. So what I do is I just cut that off, and I know there's a lot of people that would say, oh, there's all that good little stems and blah, blah, blah there. Not for me, there's not. I don't really care for all of that, so I'm not gonna deal with it. So the difficult part about the cilantro is we have to finely chop this, and it's a time-consuming and labor-filled process. So I start with a little bit of a rough cut here, rough chop, you know, to kind of just get the guy a little bit more calmed down for me. Be careful of your fingers as you go. Try to get most of the way down to the bottom here. Okay. Then I'll sort of move this into sort of a scattered pile and maybe start in the middle here and just kind of chop my way, you know, over to the side there, and then maybe chop my way back a little bit. Okay. Same thing here, maybe start a little bit further, chop my way over and back, chop my way over and back, and on the last portion there, chop my way over, chop my way back. Just when you think you're done, not quite. Still got some pretty big pieces in there, as you can see, so we continue. So move the pile around a bit, continue to chop, and you know, it's just a very painstaking process of sort of moving the stuff around and chopping it up. You want it to be pretty finely chopped. Obviously the fresh cilantro, the fresher it is, the more flavor it's gonna give. I know some people don't particularly prefer the flavor of cilantro. You don't have to use it if you don't want to, but I mean, that wouldn't be the same recipe then, so I don't know what your deal is. But in any case, you know, this is how my recipe works. And, you know, it's always been a favorite. It gets requested frequently around here, and that's fine. It's just a matter of getting the right ingredients and getting the work done. So as you can see, it's really starting to become a nice little fine chop here. And it doesn't have to be, you know, perfectly chopped everywhere. If you have a couple of big pieces, not the end of the world. It's all just flavor where I come from. So there we go. I think this looks pretty good. So take all these guys off of here. Take these guys off of here. Maybe give it one last little maybe some of these little guys over there. A little chop, chop, chop. Okay, and then we add it in. So let me get all the lovely bits off of here. You don't want to lose anything there. Okay, and we'll add this on in. And you know, since it's so finely chopped, you do the best you can to get all of it. I mean, it is an entire bunch of cilantro, so, you know, there's plenty of it in there. So the thing is, when you first look at this, it's going to look like it's an overwhelming amount of cilantro, which it kind of is. But as you mix it in, the flavors really make the difference. I think all the other stuff in the salsa, or in the pico, excuse me, is good, and it works together really well, but I think the cilantro here is what really gives that the flavor that is so fresh and so delicious when you know, have it on chips or as part of some sort of a Mexican dish like a burrito or a chipotle bowl or something. Like I said, some around these parts put it on their fried eggs or scrambled eggs or whatever. You can really use it for anything. You know, so give it a nice stir. Looks pretty good. And so all we got to do now is pop it in the fridge, chill it for at least an hour, let the flavors all get together and amalgamate a bit, and you know, you have beautiful and lovely Pico de Gallo. So good that my wife will literally eat it by the spoonful, and that's really not an exaggeration. She will use it on anything, and it really is very delicious. Okay, so one last little tidbit on this. When you put this in the fridge, you're absolutely going to want to make sure you cover it really well, because I'll be honest with you, it stinks. It's a good stink, but it still stinks. So I like to kind of wrap it like this, and then basically double wrap it. So I'll take a much larger piece here and sort of take it on the edges there, wrap it around, because you want to lock all that smell in. It does smell very strong, so when it's sitting in your fridge, you're going to open your fridge in like a half an hour and you're going to be like, whoa, what is that? I mean, it's a good what is that, but nonetheless, it's a what is that. So pop it in the fridge as long as you can. The longer you sit there, the more the flavors sort of meld together a little bit. But I typically put it in there, you know, make it in the afternoon. It's ready for dinner time. And then all the extra we can use for whatever else for the rest of the week. So there you have it. Fresh Pico de Gallo. So that's all we got for this edition of the Rev Cooks. So until next time, enjoy.
A Rev Blake Dog production.